Who remembers the Tet Offensive of 1972 in Vietnam? Some of you might have been there, I don't know. What happened? The communists invaded the South, the Americans went in to defend the South. The Americans pretty much had it won, but in 1972, when public opinion, the communists were stirring up public opinion against the war here, the Soviets spent more on the anti-war movement here than they did helping North Vietnam. You know, that war was lost in the US Congress, effectively, by traitors like John Conyers. But anyway, so 1972, was it, no, 68, sorry, it's 68, what am I saying? 68, the war was pretty much won. But then there was this massive offensive on Tet, the New Year, this big celebration of Vietnam. Wave after wave after wave of North Vietnamese regulars come down attacking every military base in South Vietnam. Major thing, major assault, and they were slaughtered everywhere. They were beaten back and slaughtered. It was a military disaster for the North Vietnamese, but that's what won them the war, because that turned the tide of American public opinion against the war. That's when Americans gave up. Think, why are we fighting this war? We thought we had it won and they're still coming at us. And that's when America caved. The war went on for a few more years, but the heart was not in it after that. Well, we are living in their Tet Offensive right now. The North Vietnamese who were running around in pajamas in paddy fields beat the world's greatest military empire by bluff. Well, right now the left, which is a few people, are trying to destroy the world's greatest country by bluff. They're trying to intimidate you. They're trying to make you give up, trying to make you say it's all over. Well, don't fold. You know, in Vietnam, North Vietnamese had a pair of, if you know poker, they had a pair of twos. We had 4 aces, and they called us out and we folded. Well, right now the left have got a couple of twos and we've got 3 or 4 aces. Don't fold, people. Yes. Call the bluff. This is the time to double down and fight more, when just as you think they've beaten us, because they are bluffing, folks. They're not nearly as strong as you think they are, and they are freaking out every step of the way that they're going to be discovered, because they've put themselves so far out there. Trump forced them to show their hand, and they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to do it more peacefully under Hillary Clinton, boil the frog a little more slowly. But they knew if they didn't take down Trump, he would have set them back 50 years. That's why they did it, and they showed their hand. So this is what I'm saying to you folks. You're faced with a choice. All of you are faced with a choice. You either double down and seize the victory that is still possible, or you fold and sell your kids into slavery. That's your choice. That is the choice you're facing right now. I'm not saying what we're facing is easy, but we've been living on credit for 60 years here now, and we've got to pay the bill. You've had the best life anybody's ever had in the world, folks. Yes. You've had the most freedom and prosperity that anybody's ever had, and most of you didn't really have to pay the bill for that. You know, this generation didn't have to pay the bill. Well, if you want your kids to live free, folks, we got to pay the bill now. We got to do the work. We got to double down. But if you think it's tough taking on your civic responsibilities and standing up and fighting for your country, you just think back to what the founders of this country went through to give it to you, folks. You had a bunch of farmers and lawyers and blacksmiths and fishermen who went up against the world's greatest military empire. Were they insane or what, folks? And all they had was this wacko idea that had never been tried, that man's rights come from God, not the government. Because all through history you had the divine right of kings. The king spoke to God, and he told you what God wanted you to do. And it always happened to be that God agreed with what the king wanted. That's how it worked, right? For thousands of years. Finally, some people stood up and said, we don't like this system. Your country was founded by 13 colonies who had all fled Europe for religious liberty. That's why this wasn't about tea taxes, as they'll tell you. This was about religious liberty. When they saw King George breaking the agreements with the colonies and coming after their freedom of conscience, they knew they were going to get a state religion imposed on them from England. And they were not going to take it. Your pastors led that revolution. Hundreds of revolutionary commanders were pastors. The majority of them were pastors or clergymen, folks. It was all about religious liberty. And they had this crazy idea, this new experiment, that your rights came from God, not the king, not the government. And that's what inspired them. But it wasn't easy, people. They fought year after year after year. They were dodging British bullets, freezing in the snow, losing almost every battle, eating berries to survive. And maybe they might get home to see their families once in 6 months. And maybe all they'd find is a burnt out barn and some graves. That's all they would find, folks. But they persevered year after year after year. I was at Morristown, New Jersey not long ago, where your troops spent the winter of 1780. And that was a little ice age, folks. That was bitter. 10,000 troops started that winter. Death, desertion, and disease took 4,000 of them. The officers were eating their dogs to survive. The troops weren't paid for months. The farmers hated them because they'd stolen every chicken for 20 miles around. They were boiling their boots to eat the leather. They were on the verge of destruction. They were almost, would you have bet that they were going to beat the British if you looked at those troops in 1780? But George Washington went down to Valley Forge and he got down on his knees and he prayed, folks. And he got up and went out to take the British out at a big surprise attack at Yorktown and turned the course of the war. Not just the war, people, world history. Can you imagine how bleak and dark this world would have been for the last 200 years without America? So what I'm saying to you folks is this. This is the time to double down. This is the time we'll try every patriot. This is the time to prove that you are a patriot when things aren't easy. I want every one of you every morning, you go to your desk and you put a photograph up of your children or your grandchildren, and you look at that photograph and you say to yourself, what am I going to do today so that you may live free? That's the decision you need to make every single day, folks. Every day. So I don't know what's going to happen, people, but I can promise you if you do nothing, your dear children will live in slavery. But if you give it everything that you have to save this republic, everything that you believe in, everything you can for your God, your country, and your children, two things may happen. One, we may give it everything that's within us to save this great republic, and maybe we still lose. But at least you'll all earn the right to look those children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. And what is that worth to you, folks? And if you win, and you absolutely can win this, people, that 2016 election, as I said, convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet. This is a special country. If you win this, you can spark an economic boom like you've never seen before. You'll set the left back 100 years. You'll spark a liberty boom not just in this country, but all around the world. You'll set the tyrants spinning all over the world, folks, if we can recover this great republic. and all of you will earn the right to pass on to your children and grandchildren not just the amazing country that you inherited, but one even greater. It's that worth a little sacrifice, people.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you do for America, for my country, and for liberty. God bless America, God bless Florida, and God bless all of you. Thank you so much. People ask me all the time, they say, why would a New Zealander care about the United States? Why would I come here? I've spoken to more than 500 audiences around your beautiful country now, but why would I care? And I say there are two reasons. The first is gratitude. You know, my country was facing invasion during World War II by the Imperial Japanese Army. And if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway, we would have been done. And that's a very strong memory even today. And the second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. Yeah. If freedom fails in this country, if we lose the Constitution, our liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which are under huge threat right now, if that is allowed to continue, we'll soon be living in a world dominated out of Moscow and Beijing and Tehran and Havana. And is that the kind of world you'd like to hand to your children, folks?
No.
So anybody who cares about liberty has to care about America. You know, people say, well, people used to, when Obama got on, people were always emailing me saying, you know, can I come and live in New Zealand? I can be safe down there. Well, it's delusional. There is nowhere to run. Now, to illustrate, recently, the Australian Minister of Defence, okay, and if you're not sure where Australia is, that's a small country off New Zealand's west coast. Small island off New Zealand's west coast, okay? But the Australian Minister of Defence was up in China for talks, and a Chinese general publicly said to him, Australia needs a godfather. Will it be an American godfather or a Chinese godfather? If you are smart, you'll choose China, because we are the growing power in the region. So how do you think that makes us feel, folks? Our Prime Minister is a Marxist in New Zealand. She's currently leading the country into China's arms. She is clamping down on free speech. She is causing massive racial division. New Zealand is not a safe sanctuary anymore. You know, if New Zealand's going to be saved, it'll be because America is saved. No country can be saved if America isn't saved. So, my big deal is national security. Because if you can't secure your country, what do you have? You've got nothing. And I look at it, there's two aspects of it, you know, that I'm sure there's military people in the room today who've taken that famous oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, right? Well, which are actually more dangerous? Now, what's worse, somebody over there in a uniform with a gun pointed at you, or somebody wearing a suit and tie in your Senate trashing your Constitution every single chance they get? What's ultimately more dangerous?
Guy in the suit.
Guy in the suit. And every day you send your brave sons and daughters overseas to fight horrible foreign enemies. And every day they are betrayed by domestic enemies who won't let them win and keep them fighting way longer than they should. If you're going to send your sons and daughters overseas to fight, is it not your duty to elect people that will at least back them up, that will stand by them? Isn't that our responsibility, folks? So, Has anybody in the room ever had to undergo any form of formal background check, like an FBI background check or some sort of security background check to get a government job or even some private sector positions? Okay, we're talking a quarter of the room, maybe a third of the room, right? And is it true that those background checks can be extremely rigorous? Yeah. They go through your family background, check out criminal convictions, overseas travel, suspect relatives. I had a friend who applied for a mid-level government position in Washington during the Obama administration, and the FBI sent 2 agents all the way to Canada to interview his communist uncle. And on the strength of that interview, my friend was denied that position. Not because he was a communist, because his uncle was, and it was too darn close. And I'll tell you folks, I actually support that decision. Because one traitor can cost you a battle. One traitor can cost you a war. One traitor could cost you your country. Imagine had Benedict Arnold been successful when he tried to betray your revolutionary soldiers. How different could your history have been had he succeeded, folks? So it's very important. But what if you're a young Marxist radical who hangs around with the local Communist Party, who control the local Democrats, or hangs around with CARE or ISNA or some Muslim Brotherhood front, and they get you elected to Congress where you may serve on the Homeland Security Committee or the Armed Services Committee or the Intelligence Committee. How much of an FBI background check do you need for that one, folks? Zip. Nothing at all. Zero. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? Well, how's that been working out? Can you see the problem there? So there are no background checks in Congress or Senate at all. None. Zero. Now, do you think maybe the Iranians know about this? Do you think the Russians know about this, or the Cubans, or the Turks, or the Venezuelans, or the Cubans, or the Chinese, or the North Koreans? And do you think maybe they might try and exploit that against you from time to time? Surely they wouldn't do that, would they? Well, don't worry, there's no way that radicals or communists or Islamists could get into your government, because you have the Federal Bureau of Investigation to stop them. Do you feel better now?
No.
Once you would have. Once it was a fine organization. Under J. Edgar Hoover, it was on top of things. And now the communists have so blackened his name, people are almost embarrassed to talk about him. But he was a great patriot, and he saved this country on multiple occasions, many occasions. You know, I had a friend who was in the FBI, said back in the 60s, the Northern California Communist Party had 5 leaders. 3 of them were FBI informants. They had them under control, folks, very much under control. Now, nothing. So, the FBI has another problem besides the infiltration of its own organization and its disgusting leadership. The FBI answers to the Judiciary Committee in the Congress, the most powerful committee in your Congress. The Judiciary Committee controls the FBI and the Justice Department. So the FBI is supposed to arrest the bad guys, and the Justice Department is supposed to prosecute them. How's that been going in recent times? So the Judiciary Committee was controlled for more than 40 years by a congressman from Michigan. Does anybody remember John Conyers? He was in Congress 160 years in total, I believe. But he headed the Judiciary Committee for 40 years. When he wasn't, he was the ranking Democrat. He is the man who abolished your House Un-American Activities Committee, one of your last lines of defense against internal subversion. John Conyers had a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA, 40 years with Democrat Socialists of America. He was at their founding convention in Detroit in 1982, 30 years with the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran. And he was also a big-time supporter of several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. Now, I've got my movie out the front, and I hope you'll get a copy. It was seen 3 million times on Amazon Prime till they took it down just before the election. But I've got John Conyers in there, in his own words, speaking. When some of your Republican congressmen tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organization, and just by the way, if you're not sure, the Muslim Brotherhood was a semi-secret organization founded in Egypt in 1929 with the goal of establishing worldwide Islam. During World War II, they worked with the Nazis. After that, they worked with the Soviet KGB. They are the father of Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, but in America they work legally through the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is big in this state, Muslim Student Association, ISNA, ICNA, and several other groups. And when some of your Republican congressmen tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organization, which it richly deserves, here's John Conyers going, oh, no, we can't do that. They've given up violence a long time ago. They're a peaceful social service agency now. We should work with them, not against them. And he got that shut down. Also on that committee, until recently, was a woman called Judy Chu from California. Now, she is a long-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party. That is a militantly pro-China Communist Party. They are thugs. They beat people up with axe handles. And they folded a few years ago, but she still hangs around with them today. She's been to China on multiple occasions. She's China's best friend in your Congress. And whenever the FBI has the temerity to arrest one of the more than 25,000 Chinese spies currently working in this country, they do arrest one of them every now and then if they get a little bit too obvious. Whenever that happens, Judy Chu is on their case. She gets them in front of the Judiciary Committee and she hammers them. You are racist, she says. You are a racist organization. You're only persecuting these people because you hate Asians. And she has arranged for sensitivity training for these cruel FBI agents so they don't persecute these poor Chinese spies any longer. Now, the current head of the Judiciary Committee is a man called Jerry Nadler, right? A man who tried to impeach President Trump twice. Now, Sean Hannity's a bit upset because you've got a Marxist in Congress now, Ocasio-Cortez. And Sean gets really upset. How could this possibly happen? We've got a socialist in Congress. This is unbelievable. Because she's a member of Democrat Socialist of America, which despite its name is a deeply communist organization. And well, Sean needs to learn a few things. Jerry Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee, has been an active member or supporter of Democratic Socialists of America since at least 1977. The man is a Marxist, folks, a complete Marxist, yet he oversees the FBI and the Judiciary Committee. See, last year, your FBI was supposedly out there trying to track down Black Lives Matter rioters. I could tell them 100 people to arrest, and all of it would have stopped. I could give them the list. All of it would have been over. Well, they were out there trying to track them down. Well, Jerry Nadler, see, their boss is Jerry Nadler. See, a few years ago, Jerry Nadler got Bill Clinton to pardon a woman from jail, a woman called Susan Rosenberg. She was involved with the Weather Underground terrorist group. She was in jail for 54 years as an accessory to murder and for possession of explosives. And Jerry Nadler got her sprung. That woman now serves as the chairman of the board of the fundraising arm of Black Lives Matter. So the FBI was out there trying to track down the friends of their boss. You think that might make them a little bit concerned, folks? So you imagine the FBI decides, well, we haven't really investigated congressmen for political crimes since World War II. We'll go after them for shady land deals or bribery, but we don't touch them for political stuff. But we know there's at least 100 members of the House who are working with the Iranians, the Cubans, the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Communist Party USA, Democrat Socialist of America, sometimes all of the above. And they have given us the nuclear deal with Iran. They've given us immigration amnesty, Obamacare, all these policies. We better start investigating these people before they destroy the country. Let's go to the Judiciary Committee and tell Mr. Nadler and Mrs. Chu what we're going to do. Mr. Nadler, Mrs. Chu, we need to investigate at least 100 of your Democratic colleagues for working for the other side. Do you mind? And by the way, Mr. Nadler, by the way, Mrs. Chu, you're both on the list. Is that all right? What do you think is going to happen to their budget next year, folks? Why do you think they didn't dare to touch Hillary Clinton when she was guilty as sin? Because she could be their boss, folks. She could destroy them. They're not going to go after the hand that feeds them. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. So this is the problem. You've got 100 members of the House and 25 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in Orange County. They're running Homeland Security, they're running Armed Services, they're running intelligence in both houses. Every committee in Congress is controlled by a Marxist, as is everyone in the Senate. Everyone. And there's no background checks, and there's no media scrutiny, and the FBI doesn't dare touch them, and the Republican Party is either so ignorant or gutless that they won't do it either. That's why we are where we are, folks, because there's no internal security. And so your enemies have taken advantage of that. I'll give you one more example. And he, again, he's in my movie, in his own words saying this. Don't believe me. So Andre Carson from Indiana, heavily involved with Marxists, one of your 3 Muslim members of Congress. He's at a Muslim Brotherhood front group convention in 2012 in Connecticut. And he gets up in front of the audience just like this, and he says, "Hey, I've been told we got some infiltrators in the audience today. We got some spies here checking us out because they believe we are here." They're probably from Act for America, I suppose. So they are here because they believe we are plotting to destroy this country. And then he grins. And he says, "Well, I say to you people undercover, I say to you spies, Allah will not allow you to stop us." This man now serves on the Intelligence Committee overseeing the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the DEA, every one of your 16 intelligence agencies. And just speaking of the Intelligence Committee, remember Eric Swalwell from California, folks? Caught sleeping with a Chinese agent. She got him elected, and Nancy Pelosi won't take him off the Intelligence Committee. Refuses to take him off. What do you have to do to get removed, folks? There's a great photo on the internet of Christine Fong, the spy who seduced Eric Swalwell. And she's at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, right next to a guy called Russell Lowe. That is the guy, the Chinese spy, who was Dianne Feinstein's office manager for 20 years, people, when Dianne Feinstein was serving on the Senate Intelligence Committee. There is no background checks. There is no scrutiny. These people are running rampant. Remember when 3 Pakistani brothers were caught managing the servers of 40 Democratic members of Congress? And they got caught and they were allowed to leave the country and nobody got held to account? That's what's happening in your Congress right now. The deep state, which is communist, is right through your Congress and right through your Senate. Right, and a little bit on both sides, people. But there is some good news. Isn't it great? We've finally got a moderate Democrat in the White House. Uncle Joe Biden, he's a moderate, blue-collar, good old-fashioned Democrat. No more of these crazy liberals. We've got a good old Harry Truman Democrat in the White House, right? Isn't that fantastic? Complete and utter lie. I'll tell you a couple of things about Uncle Joe. Well, Joe Biden was a 29-year-old city councillor in Wilmington, Delaware in 1972. And he decides to run for US Senate against a 4-term Republican incumbent, and Delaware was a Republican state back then, with an 80% approval rating. And he beat him. It was the shock of 1972. Just unbelievable. So, how did he do it? Well, he did it because of a group called the Council for a Livable World. It still exists, one of the most dangerous organizations in your country. Go on Google, look at their website tonight. The Council for a Livable World, the president of that organization at the time was a man called Albert Gore Sr. Some of you may have heard of his son. He invented the internet and global warming. And thank God for Florida that he did not become president in 2000, folks, because we wouldn't even be here now if he was. But anyway, so Albert Gore Sr. recruited Biden, got him a whole bunch of money. I think it was $287,000, which was a lot of money in 1972. He got him endorsements from all over the country and a whole bunch of volunteers from out of state. He got him elected. Now, Albert Gore Sr. was the protege of a man called Armand Hammer. I'm sure some of you have heard that name. He was an American industrialist, the founder of Occidental Petroleum, and the leading American Soviet agent of the early 20th century. He is the man who kept the Bolshevik Revolution alive when it was in danger of collapse. And he was the man behind Al Gore Sr. and indirectly behind Joe Biden. Well, the Council for a Livable World was actually founded by a man called Leo Szilard. He was a Hungarian. He became a Manhattan Project scientist. He was working on your atomic bomb. You know, the bomb you used to defeat the Japanese. And the head of security, Leslie Groves, always wanted to fire Szilard because he knew he was a Hungarian communist. But he couldn't because he was too darn valuable. Well, after the war, Szilard became an anti-nuclear campaigner. And in 1962, he sets up the Council for a Livable World. And what they did was this: they got a bit of money together and they went to small states, because you can elect a senator from a small state with very little money. You know, Rhode Island, Vermont, South Dakota, New Hampshire, etc. So they went to these small states and they found extreme left-wingers and they got them elected. And they would say to them, we will elect you, we will staff you, we will guide you, we will help you, we will re-elect you. The only thing we ask in return is that you always vote to destroy the US military. You always vote to wreck the military, to downgrade the military, to cancel weapon systems, to negotiate horrible treaties with the Soviet Union that gives them a big advantage. Your only job is to wreck the US military. Now, it turned out, it was revealed in 1994 in a book by Pavel Sudoplatov, a former high-ranking Soviet intelligence officer, that Beria, Stalin's intelligence chief, had passed down the word to Szilard and his friends: stop your spying, it's dangerous. Instead, use your political capital to work for US nuclear disarmament. Get rid of US nuclear weapons, downgrade the military so the Soviet Union can either destroy the United States or blackmail you into submission. That was the mission, to gut your military so the Soviets could rule the world. And Szilard set up the Council for a Livable World to do just that. It's now elected over 200 of your senators and close to 300 congressmen, including several presidents, including Dianne Feinstein, including Barack Obama. And I've got, again, in my tape, I've got Joe Biden on tape at the 50th anniversary of the Council for a Livable World. You were with me at the beginning. I couldn't have got elected without you. I owe you so much. You were there with me, guiding me when I was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. You helped Obama and I negotiate the START treaty with Russia. The treaty that was so bad for America and so good for Putin that Trump had to unilaterally cancel it. And now Biden is reinstituting it. Last year, the Council made its very first presidential endorsement, Joe Biden. They have already put 4 of their staff members into the Biden administration in the disarmament positions. They are coming for your military. Why is Biden going to the military right now, purging out conservatives, Christians, racists? Because he wants a military that will be used to crack down on Americans. Not a military that will stand up to your enemies, a military that will become the enemy of the American people. That is the big battle we are facing, folks. We got to preserve the US military. And I'll tell you why. A lot of Americans have been complaining for years that other countries are not pulling their weight when it comes to defense. And that's true. That's absolutely true. And Trump did a lot to fix that. But there's another side to that. Because America has the world reserve currency, and America is addicted to deficit spending, every country that takes American dollars is taking a little bit of your inflation. You are stealing from those countries a little bit every single day, every time they take a US dollar. And they were willing to tolerate that because America was strong and would protect them. When your military is strong, your enemies back off, your allies stay with you, and your creditors back off too. If you destroy your military, which Biden is intent on doing, and the Democrats behind him are intent on doing, your creditors are going to come after you, your allies are going to desert you, and your enemies are going to come after you too. America's survival depends now on a strong military. That's all we've got left, people. If America's military goes, America goes. And I don't think a lot of Americans appreciate that. You've got Russia and China right now geared up to take you out. And I don't mean compete with you economically. I mean take you out fully. Because China wants to occupy this country. You know, they're starved for land. They got all these people. They know if they don't put those people somewhere, they're going to have a revolution. And America is the place. They're not going to go to Siberia. Who wants to live there? Some of them might go to Australia, but America is the main target. That's why we're at war with China right now. Now, The other cheering bit of news is that we are in World War III right now with China. People talk about the non-aggression principle. China has been aggressing against the United States since 1949. You know, it started in Vietnam War, all the heroin they were selling to your troops, making money and destroying your military effectiveness. So what's China doing now? The Wuhan virus. That was released, timed, I believe, for election year. Now, I cannot prove it was deliberately released, though the circumstantial evidence is very high, but you can absolutely prove it was deliberately spread. There's no question the Chinese, they banned internal air travel and they allowed international air travel. There was a big New Year celebration every year in Wuhan. Goes for a whole week. It's like Mardi Gras. And the authorities there said, we better shut it down because of the virus. And the Communist Party authorities said, it goes ahead. So Chinese came from Florida and from Mexico and from Australia and from New Zealand and Britain and France, and they partied up in Wuhan for a whole week, and then they're allowed to fly back out and infect the whole world. Absolutely, it was a Chinese plot. Now, normally, when you have a pandemic, excuse me, when you have a pandemic, you quarantine the sick and everybody else goes about their business and takes precautions, right? But the World Health Organization told us that we couldn't do that this time because there was evidence of asymptomatic transmission. Many people without symptoms were transmitting, and as we didn't have testing, we were going to have to quarantine everybody or there'd be 2 million dead before Christmas. And President Trump, in election year, was faced with the quandary. Do I ignore this garbage, or do I just do the normal approach, quarantine the sick, don't shut down the economy? He knew if he did that, he would get blamed for every dead grandmother up until the election. He had to follow the advice. Well, it turns out the World Health Organization says, well, actually, we were wrong. There wasn't really evidence of asymptomatic transmission. But you've got to look at the World Health Organization, headed by Mr. Tedros of Ethiopia. Look at his CV, folks. He's a former leader of that country's pro-Chinese Communist Party. The man is completely in China's pocket. 100%. So there were three purposes for releasing the virus. First, obviously, to bring down Trump. You know, the second, wreck the US economy, because that now enables the Chinese to buy up a lot of stuff cheap, for one thing. But the real purpose is this. Obama did massive damage to the US military. Massive damage. While Russia and China were building up like crazy, Obama was cancelling everything he could, destroying morale, transgender policies, horrible rules of engagement. The military hated Obama for a very good reason. Under Obama, your Navy was building 9 ships a year while China was building 50. Their Navy has 5 times more ships than you do now. Some of them very high tech. So Obama made a mess of things deliberately. You know, that famous, with the Russian foreign minister, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Obama was talking to his boss people. So when Trump came in, he saw that we were heading for war and that we were going to lose unless he upped the military budget and changed the morale in the military. So he got rid of the transgender policy. He changed the rules of engagement so your troops could actually fight to win for a change. And he upped the military budget quite significantly, and morale went through the roof. Ask anybody who served under Obama, then Trump, what the difference in morale was. Well, you can only do that on the back of a strong economy. Excuse me. What do you do with the military budget when your economy's in the tank, folks? Already 31 Democrats, led by Barbara Lee of California, former Communist Party member who's been to Cuba 22 times, has written a letter to the Armed Services Committee demanding massive defence budget cuts in the next budget go-around. This is the program of the left going forward. Their argument's going to be, we can't afford it, people are starving, the economy's bad, we've got to cut the military budget. We've got to cut the military budget. And if they succeed, who runs the world from that point, folks?
China.
China and Russia do, people. This is what this is all about, folks. The COVID was a military attack on the United States designed to destroy your president, wreck your economy, and cut the military budget into ribbons. That's what it was all designed to do. So we got to stop that third part happening. We got to protect the military budget beyond anything else, because that's our survival, folks. We can stand poverty, we can't stand nuclear annihilation, because that's what we're looking at. I'm telling you like it is, folks. This is where we really are at right now. And so, I wish I was wrong. I wish I was the biggest idiot in America right now, right? But I'm laying it out. Then we get the Black Lives Matter protests, right? All because George Floyd got killed in Minneapolis, okay? No, this was planned since 2016. I don't mean George Floyd's killing was planned, but the violence was planned. Because the left, the communists know that every year about 1,100 people are killed by the police. About 15% of those will be black on the percentage of the population. And though most of them are perfectly justifiable, they know they're going to get a controversial case a couple of times a year, or one that they can make controversial. They tried to start the riots when the man got killed in Atlanta, the so-called jogging case. They tried to start the riots when the young woman was killed in Louisville in a no-knock police raid. Didn't quite get there. George Floyd was a gift because it was so public, but it was also a gift because it was in the headquarters of the Communist Party that started the riots, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. The head of Freedom Road, which has got about 1,000 members, pro-Chinese communists, Steph Yorick, said publicly the day that Trump was inaugurated that their job was to destroy President Trump by making this country ungovernable. And it was her wife, Jess Sundin, that headed the organization, the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar, that actually organized all the riots. I've got her on tape admitting this. I've got her on tape saying the joy she felt when Precinct 3 was burnt to the ground. That the violence and the looting and the arson was an integral part of the movement. This wasn't peaceful Black Lives Matter, you know, with getting taken over by radicals. This was militant, radical, right from the start, pro-Chinese communists. They burnt, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization burnt Chicago, they burnt Minneapolis, they burnt Kenosha a bit later. They were the ones who did the riots in Jacksonville, in Tallahassee, Tampa, and Miami. They did the riots in Dallas and Houston, Salt Lake City, East LA, and San Jose. The rest of it was run by another pro-Chinese Communist Party called Liberation Road. Liberation Road has a front group that some of you may have heard of. They started this group. It's called Black Lives Matter. The three women who started Black Lives Matter, Opal Tometi, Elijah Gaza, and Patrisse Cullors, are all affiliates of Liberation Road. This is a pro-Chinese communist group. The Black Lives Matter is controlled by a group called Asians for Black Lives. That is a front for the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco, which basically runs that city, and that is a front for the Communist Party of China. China burnt your cities, people. This is all China. And Elijah Gaza, incidentally, has worked for the Chinese Progressive Association She's been to communist Vietnam, she's been to Ferguson, she organised this, and she's very close friends of a young communist called Latifah Simon, who happens to be very close friends of another young Black Lives Matter, well, another Black Lives Matter supporter you've probably heard of, a woman called Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a Maoist. Her whole family has been involved in the Black Panthers, Maoism, communism, her entire political career, her entire life. She was a Maoist before she could talk, folks. So then we got the elections. So they used the energy of all these young Black and Latino people and young white kids fired up because Trump's a racist. America's a horrible racist country. We've got to change the government. So Asians for Black Lives, the Chinese Progressive Association, has another front group called Seed the Vote. And they organised 7 voter registration groups in Black and Latino communities in the 7 key states. They had Black leaders organising communities in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They had Detroit Action in Detroit, Lucha in Arizona, the New Georgia Project in Georgia. And they claim they won 6 out of the 7 states they targeted for Harris-Biden. What they did was lifted the minority votes in the big cities to the point they hoped it would make the pre-planned fraud less noticeable. But Trump did so well amongst minorities that it wasn't enough, so they had to stop the voting and just throw in a whole bunch of ballots, which is how they got found out. Now, the model for these voter registration organisations, it's been going for about 10 years now. Does anybody remember when Virginia used to be a red state? Virginia was a very conservative state. What is it now, folks? Completely Democrat. 10 years it took. Well, that happened because in 2005 they established a group called New Virginia Majority. And it was a voter registration group focusing on minorities, especially in Northern Virginia. They got lots of minorities there. And it's run by Liberation Road, the pro-Chinese communist group that gave you Black Lives Matter, and funded by some of the same people that funded Kamala Harris. And so New Virginia Majority got out there and just went into all the minority groups and signed up and registered people year after year after year after year. And they claim they signed up about 300,000 new minority voters. Then they worked with Terry McAuliffe, the then governor of Virginia, to legalize and give voting rights to 200,000 Florida felons. That 500,000 is how they flipped Virginia. And they were very sophisticated because they were using GIS mapping, very sophisticated computer maps. These maps could identify every precinct in Virginia and give you the ethnic breakdown, income level, voting patterns of every neighborhood. So they could send Iranian volunteers into Iranian households. They could send Puerto Ricans into Puerto Rican households. They could send Haitians into Haitian households. And they signed up people right under the noses of the GOP. Completely under their noses. Now, incidentally, these maps are generated by a graduate of George Mason University Geography Department called Steve McClure, a Liberation Road Maoist communist. For the last 10 years, Steve McClure has been generating these maps, working out of the Geography Department of Wuhan University, China. They're using Chinese computers and Chinese money and Chinese labor to flip districts across the southern states. They're doing the same thing in North Carolina, in Georgia, the same thing in Tennessee. Their aim is to flip 2 or 3 more in Texas. Their aim is to flip a couple more southern states, and that's it. The Republican Party is finished. It's gone. It's over. And guess what, folks? They have a partner group that's trying to do the same thing. A partner group to New Virginia Majority. Guess what it's called, people? It's called New Florida Majority. Guess who was backing Andrew Gillum in 2018, people? The same communists who backed Kamala Harris and New Florida Majority, Liberation Road. They lifted the Democrat vote 40% in 2018. Gillum should have easily won, easily. But Trump ignored Adam Putnam and went for Ron DeSantis, and DeSantis stuck it to Gillum, called him out for being a socialist, and he lifted the Republican vote by 40.5%. Just enough to win. Just enough. You were saved from a communist governor by a few thousand votes, folks. And guess who was behind the referendum in 2018 that gave 1.4 million Florida felons the right to vote? New Florida Majority. The Maoists did it, people. The Chinese are working in your state to flip your state right now. And you dodged a bullet big time, folks, by having DeSantis instead of Putnam. Because you would have lost. Guarantee it. And they're still coming after you, people. Ron DeSantis has got to get on their case, because these are agents of a foreign power working in your elections. I was in Gainesville to a Tea Party group about 6 months before the primary in 2018. And that time Gillum was on 7% and Gwen Graham was on 23%. And she was the daughter of a former governor and a former congresswoman herself. And I told that audience that Andrew Gillum was going to be the Democratic candidate. And of course they were a little skeptical. You know, Gillum was even under FBI investigation at the time. But I said, that won't matter, he's going to be your candidate. Because I knew that New Florida Majority was backing him, and the polling that was being done was inaccurate, because New Florida Majority was working the black and Latino communities of Orlando and Jacksonville and Fort Lauderdale and Tampa, all those communities that don't normally get polled because they don't normally vote very much. That's why the big surprise, folks, because they were in those communities signing up hundreds of thousands of black and Latino voters, communist Chinese operation, right in Florida, right under your very noses. So, if I thought there was no hope for America, I'll be back in my beautiful New Zealand right now, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans, okay? But I'm here for a reason. People, that 2016 election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet, people. Yes. This is a special country with a special role in history. But it's up to us to fulfill it. Up to us to make sure that it can live up to its potential. That comes down to us. Now, what do? Now, I wrote an article recently for the Epoch Times. Does anybody read the Epoch Times at all? Quite a few of you. Well, those who don't, I urge you to subscribe to it. It's the very best source of truthful news out there today. Very anti-communist perspective, but very objective, very entertaining paper. It's great. And I wrote an article called A New Zealander's 9 Starter Steps for Saving America from Socialism. And General Flynn put it on Parler, and you know, what's the other lady's name? Cindy Powell spread it around there. It got 13,000 shares on Epoch Times alone. It's been all over. I get letters about it all the time. And I just want to outline some of these steps, not all of them, because I think we need to know what we can do. And it's up to us to do it. It really, really is. The first thing is face reality. You know, maybe President Trump's going to come back on August the 9th or September the 12th or November the 11th, but we cannot bet on that, people. We've got to act as though he isn't. We have got to actually get out there and do the hard work. See, this was the whole QAnon thing. A lot of people bought into it. And what did it achieve in one way? It got a lot of support for Trump, but it got a lot of people thinking, yeah, I don't really have to help Trump because he's got it all under control. Don't worry, there's a plan. I don't have to go down to the polling booth. I don't have to go and knock on doors. I'm going to go bass fishing today because he's got it under control. And did he? Did he have it under control? Trump was outmaneuvered by the Communist Party of China, by the Democrats, and traitors in his own party. And we've got to face that reality. If he comes back, that's great, but I'm not banking on it. I'm going to work as though he's not. So we have to face reality. We're in a communist revolution right now, and it's directed by China. Recently, John Ratcliffe, who is Trump's intelligence advisor, said the Chinese have compromised or blackmailed so many American congressmen, they can determine which legislation goes through your Congress and which doesn't. That should tell you where we are, folks. That's not me saying that, that's John Ratcliffe saying that. And it got about half an hour's play on the media. Surprise, surprise. So we're in a revolution. Second thing is, you got some people out there who's saying, well, we're not going to bother about working and trying to save the country and doing the hard work. We got all the guns. We're going to march on Washington. We're going to have a revolution, right? What these people all seem to not quite understand is this: they all assume that if they have some sort of uprising, that the US military is going to say, right on, we're with you, we're going to help you out, and you're going to march on Washington together. Obama had 8 years, people, to get rid of every patriotic general he could and replace them with losers and globalists and Harvard sociology majors and whatever. The leadership of your military is on the side of the socialists now. Doesn't mean the rank and file are. They're on your side. That's why they're purging them right now. And so by some miracle, say we did have this massive uprising and, you know, we're all going to march on Washington and take the country back. This is a global revolution. Do you think the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians are going to stand by while you march on Washington with your AR-15s and take down the government that they put in place? You're going to have United Nations on your soil, Russian troops, Iranian troops, Chinese troops. There is no violent solution here, folks. This has got to be the old-fashioned way of hard-working, dedicated people saving the country. That's the reality. We've ignored it for 60 years. Do you think we were never going to have to pay the bill? Do you think we're going to live on credit forever, folks? Does that work with your credit cards, people? Doesn't work with your country either. So, you know, and I say, you know, groups like the John Birch Society have been doing this. This country would not be here today without the JBS and the work it's done for the last 60 years. The JBS was born the same year I was, and I'm very proud of that. And all of that time, it's been in the trenches, doing the hard work, doing exactly the kind of thing that is now needed to be done by a lot more people to save this country. That's the reality. Third step, it doesn't apply in Florida, but it's close your Republican primaries. Florida has got closed primaries, thank gosh. That's why you've got Ron DeSantis. 45 states have open primaries, people, meaning that you go and vote for a Democrat, for a Republican in your primary, the Democrats and the communists can also come and vote in your primary. And you think they're going to vote for the patriot and the hero, or are they going to vote for the wimpiest Republican they can find? That is why Lindsey Graham is still the senator from South Carolina. A conservative state, wimpy senator. That's why Lisa Murkowski is still a senator from Alaska. Very conservative state, absolutely horrible Republican. Because they have open primaries, so the Democrats and the communists come and vote in your primary. That's why you have a very conservative base and wimpy Republican representatives, because you let your enemy select your candidates all over the country time and time again. If we had open primaries in this state, people, you would not have Ron DeSantis right now. Guarantee it. You would have had Ron, you would have had Adam Putnam, and you would have lost. Close the primaries. Third thing is election integrity. You know, the problem is our side doesn't trust election voting machines now, right? So even if you had the very best machines in the world that are absolutely unhackable, our side doesn't trust them, and a lot of our side won't vote. So we've already had DeSantis has signed off an election integrity bill, which has done some good stuff. Many other states are doing this as well. There's 30 Republican states out there. All of them have got to do this. But it's got to have, which is lacking so far, and this is where you've got to come in and force this, there's got to be very stiff penalties for vote fraud and no more machines. Voter ID, paper ballots. People, if somebody got 15 years jail for vote fraud, do you think we'd have the problem we have today? If a dozen people had gone to jail after the 2016 election for vote fraud, do you think we would have lost the election in 2020? And the machines. Because see, this is what happened in Georgia. Mitch McConnell blamed Trump for losing those 2 Senate races in Georgia, right? We lost those 2 Senate seats because Mitch McConnell wouldn't fight for the election, and a whole bunch of Georgia Republicans said, to heck with this, it's going to be just as crooked as the last one, why bother? That's why we lost it. And that's going to happen to us again going forward unless we get very, very serious about penalties and no more voting machines. Because a lot of our base won't trust the machines. A lot of our base won't trust the process. It's hard enough to drag our people to the polls anyway without having that there, is it not? Oh, I'm not going to go. I could go fishing today. The elections are crooked. They got machines. Why should I bother? Exactly. And that's where you'll hear time and time again, unless we clean it up. And that's where citizens have to be involved in making sure the next session there's got to be more bills going through, toughen everything up. Ron DeSantis will do it if he's given a bill. Fourth thing, we have to build an alliance of free states. There are 30 states now run by Republican legislatures. Some of them have Democrat governors, but there are 30 states still controlled by Republicans. That stretches from Alaska, the Arctic Circle, right through the middle of the country, down to the Gulf of Mexico and the Florida Keys. That is right through the country. Then you've got outliers like New Hampshire, South Carolina, etc. That is a massive block. You know, when Biden told DeSantis to shut the restaurants in Florida, your governor politely told him, no, we won't do that. I heard it wasn't that polite, but, you know, whatever. So, but I'm being polite. Well, then Biden said, well, we might have to shut air travel into Florida. We might even have to shut road travel into Florida. Well, they could do that to Florida, but if they couldn't do that if Florida joined up with Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and Texas and Arkansas and Kansas and Missouri and Iowa and Nebraska and Ohio and Indiana and South Dakota and North Dakota and Montana and Idaho and Alaska. If you got all those states standing together as a bloc, the federal government would be in big trouble, folks, because that's where the water comes from. That's where the food comes from. That's where the people work for a living and can actually do real things. People, I'm not talking secession, I'm talking a nation within a nation. The 10th Amendment tells us that the federal government serves at the pleasure of the states, not the other way around. The states have every right to refuse to take unconstitutional orders. The states are guaranteed a Republican form of representative government. Are they not? It's in the Constitution, folks. They've got to stand together as a bloc against the federal government. Already 20 of your states have written a letter to Biden saying that if you come after our elections with your H.R. 1, there's going to be big consequences. You have DeSantis and the Governor Abbott of Texas working together on internet bills and other bills. You already have a coalition coming together. We have got to accelerate that. You've got to get that out there. You've got to talk about that in every way you can. Let's get the red states working together. And then we bring in the red counties of the blue states, all those constitutional sheriffs. That's 80% of America, folks. That's 80% of America standing against the federal government. We are not, you are not coming here taking our gun rights. You are not coming after our voting procedures. You're not taking our freedom of speech or freedom of religion. Right now, DeSantis is working on a bill, and so is Texas, to fine big tech when they censor conservatives. $100,000 a day, I think, for each company. Well, let's make it $10 million a day, and let's make it 30 states all doing that. Big tech would become little tech really, really quickly. We have the power, folks. We are the majority. We have the infrastructure of this country. Why are we bossed around by Los Angeles and Washington and New York? The states, the red states, have to stand together, a nation within a nation. And on that same token, two more things. There's a few more, but two more. I'll just do two more of them. We have to build an alliance of free state, a national umbrella America First organization. By that I mean, what is this? I've been all over this country and there's new groups setting up everywhere. It's like the Tea Party all over again. But the demographic is way younger, because you've got young people sitting at home reading their kids' textbooks, horrified what their kids are learning. They're seeing Biden gutting their jobs, taking their pensions away, ruining their futures, and they are concerned, and they're getting active. Well, see, the left have an organization called Our Revolution. It's got 600 branches. It operates in 50 states. And it's not part of the Democratic Party, but it votes in the Democrat primaries. And they vote for the commie every time. That's why you've got an Ocasio-Cortez and a Rashida Tlaib and a Cori Bush, because of Our Revolution going into the Democrat primaries and voting for the communist. Well, we need an America First coalition. All the groups need to be working roughly together under a banner, because Trump is planning this now. He's drawing up lists of all the rhinos that need to get primaried in 2022. All the scumbags who voted to sign off an election they knew was stolen. He's drawing up those lists, and he's vetting candidates to run against them. Well, we have to get everybody into the Republican primaries to get ready to vote during those primaries. Yes. Everybody. Doesn't mean you have to go to Republican meetings. Doesn't mean you have to listen to Mitch McConnell. This is designed to destroy Mitch McConnell, right? So that when it comes for election time, we've got 80 million MAGA people, plus another 20 million Democrats who wish they'd been MAGA people, ready to go into those primaries and vote out every rhino scumbag they can and replace them with a whole bunch more Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Lauren Bobbitt's and Josh Hawley's. We got to be ready to completely take over the GOP in 2022. America First. And I'll tell you what, Trump can actually, I would like to see him run a whole lot of candidates in the Democratic districts too, because there's 69 Democrats now in red states. Just cleaning up the vote fraud alone would probably cost 20 of them their seats. But I'll tell you what, if you ran MAGA candidates in those districts, they wouldn't vote for a normal Republican, but they might vote for a MAGA Republican. You could slaughter the Democratic Party in the next election if you get organised. And I'll give you one more. Boycott. How did the Indians get the British out of India in the 40s? Did they have a revolution? Did they throw bombs? They just had a nationwide boycott. We're not going to buy any British goods, none at all. And the British said, who'd been there 200 years, said, well, we can't make any money here now, have your independence, we're off. Very peaceful. Organised by Gandhi and his supporters. Well, look, we've got 80 million MAGA voters, and as I said again, another 20 million people who wish they were. We need to follow President Trump's advice. The very first thing we should be doing, boycott everything that comes from the Communist Party of China. Everything. Look at your labels. Yes. Don't buy any Chinese products at all. All you're doing is helping your enemy. They got so bad, this is what President Trump had to do. The companies that control your military pensions, the pensions of your soldiers, your sailors, your airmen, last year we're going to invest all that money in Chinese communist companies that are basically part of the People's Liberation Army. So your soldiers were going to send their money to China to build weapons to kill them. And Trump had to stop that. But it's just amazing how it would even get that far. So look at your portfolio. You've got shares. Look at where your companies are invested. If they're invested in China, get out of them. Yes. Absolutely. There's a group in Florida, the Timothy Plan. Art Alley, they invest in Christian companies, patriotic American companies, have a very high rate of return. Spend your money with your friends, not your enemies. Buying from communist China today is like buying from Nazi Germany in 1938. It's immoral and it's suicidal. Every local community, and this is happening all over America right now, draw up a list of your local groups, all the patriot businesses in your area, all the woke, scumbag, unpatriotic businesses. Draw up a list, publicise the list, send it round, and you tell these woke businesses you're not getting $1 of ours ever again until you change your ways. Put your money with your friends. Build a nation within a nation. Buy from each other's businesses. Support each other. Don't spend your money with your enemies. Why would you give money to China so they can build weapons to kill your grandchildren? Why would you do that? Because that's what they're trying to do with it. Anybody think I'm exaggerating, folks?
No.
And so the other thing Trump said the other day, he said when Georgia tried to clean up its voting, a whole bunch of companies said, well, we're going to boycott Georgia. The Major Baseball League, the Coca-Cola, UPS, there was another one or two. And Trump said, we need to boycott all these companies. Darn right we do. I don't go near UPS now. I'm not going to buy any Coca-Cola. I'm not going to do anything. 80 million people boycotting these companies, folks. You see how long they can handle that. We have the power. And this is what we should borrow a tactic from Alinsky. Alinsky said, pick one target and freeze it and go after that target. Let's all go for Bed Bath & Beyond, right? They are a big box company. They've suffered through the COVID, like a lot of retail stores have. They're in big financial trouble. And they come out and told you that your president tried to start a riot in Washington, D.C. And because of that, they're not going to stock Mike Lindell's pillows any longer. Well, let's 80 million MAGA people, starting this month, no more money with Bed Bath & Beyond until they either apologise to the president or they go out of business. And by the same token, instead of the wedding present you were going to buy from Bed Bath & Beyond, buy some nice sheets or pillows from Mr. Lindell. Boycott, boycott. Buy from your friends, boycott your enemies. We did that, folks. We would end the cancel culture pretty darn quickly. We have the buying power to do it. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of things you can do individually and at state level to turn this around. You can work to stiffen the voting procedures. You can work to spread boycotts of our enemies all around the place. You can join new organizations and start new organizations and get ready to sign up as many of your friends as you can to vote in those primaries in 2022. All of that you can do now. All of that you can get organized to do. And you can encourage Ron DeSantis to do what he's doing. You can write letters to Greg Abbott praising him when he does the right stuff. You can write letters about how the states have got to join together. Talk about it on Facebook. You can do a lot to push this. So please read the article, Epoch Times, New Zealanders 9 starter steps for saving America from socialism. It'll give you some ideas. Everything that you can do. But this is where we're at, folks. So we're in a revolution, and we're not about to go over the cliff. We've already gone over the cliff. We're now trying to claw our way back up. That's where we are. So what do? You know, all of you, I think, in this room, most of the people in this room have been politically active for some time. And you've been out there knocking on doors and writing out checks and going to meetings like this, organising meetings, talking to people, setting up phone trees, putting up yard signs, and you do it year after year after year after year. And you tell me if I'm wrong. I think this is why you do it. Do you do it because you love your country and you love your kids?
Yes.
Is that why you do it? And I know what you've been through here, folks. I know the bitterness of electing a great president, then working your butts off to re-elect him. Now, if we'd lost fair and square, that would have been bitter. But when you win and it's stolen and nobody stands up, I can't find much more bitter than that. And that makes people very despondent, and I can understand why. But we owe it to our kids to carry on. The very fact that they stole that election so blatantly shows how desperate they are and how vulnerable they are. Because if they were that stupid to do that blatantly, they were desperate. They are scared of the American majority. They are terrified of you. We got to understand, this is a bluff. Give you an example. Who remembers the Tet Offensive of 1972 in Vietnam? Some of you might have been there. I don't know. What happened? The communists invaded the South. The Americans went in to defend the South. The Americans pretty much had it won. But in 1972, when public opinion, the communists were stirring up public opinion against the war here, the Soviets spent more on the anti-war movement here than they did helping North Vietnam. You know, that war was lost in the US Congress, effectively, by traitors like John Conyers. But anyway, so 1972, was it, no, 68, sorry, it's 68, what am I saying? 68, the war was pretty much won. But then there was this massive offensive on Tet, the New Year, this big celebration of Vietnam. Wave after wave after wave of North Vietnamese regulars come down attacking every military base in South Vietnam. Major thing, major assault, and they were slaughtered everywhere. They were beaten back and slaughtered. It was a military disaster for the North Vietnamese, but that's what won them the war, because that turned the tide of American public opinion against the war. That's when Americans gave up. Think, why are we fighting this war? We thought we had it won and they're still coming at us. And that's when America caved. The war went on for a few more years, but the heart was not in it after that. Well, we are living in their Tet Offensive right now. The North Vietnamese who were running around in pajamas in paddy fields beat the world's greatest military empire by bluff. Well, right now the left, which is a few people, are trying to destroy the world's greatest country by bluff. They're trying to intimidate you. They're trying to make you give up, trying to make you say it's all over. Well, don't fold. You know, in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese had a pair of, if you know poker, they had a pair of twos. We had 4 aces, and they called us out and we folded. Well, right now the left have got a couple of twos and we've got 3 or 4 aces. Don't fold, people.
Yes. Call
the bluff. This is the time to double down and fight more when just as you think they've beaten us, because they are bluffing, folks. They're not nearly as strong as you think they are, and they are freaking out every step of the way that they're going to be discovered, because they've put themselves so far out there. Trump forced them to show their hand, and they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to do it more peacefully under Hillary Clinton, boil the frog a little more slowly. But they knew if they didn't take down Trump, he would have set them back 50 years. That's why they did it, and they showed their hand. So this is what I'm saying to you folks. You're faced with a choice. All of you are faced with a choice. You either double down and seize the victory that is still possible, or you fold and sell your kids into slavery. That's your choice. That is the choice you're facing right now. I'm not saying what we're facing is easy, but we've been living on credit for 60 years here now, and we've got to pay the bill. You've had the best life anybody's ever had in the world, folks. You've had the most freedom and prosperity that anybody's ever had, and most of you didn't really have to pay the bill for that. You know, this generation didn't have to pay the bill. Well, if you want your kids to live free, folks, we got to pay the bill now. We got to do the work. We got to double down. But if you think it's tough, taking on your civic responsibilities and standing up and fighting for your country, you just think back to what the founders of this country went through to give it to you, folks. You had a bunch of farmers and lawyers and blacksmiths and fishermen who went up against the world's greatest military empire. Were they insane or what, folks? And all they had was this wacko idea. This wacko idea that had never been tried, that man's rights come from God, not the government. Because all through history you had the divine right of kings. The king spoke to God and he told you what God wanted you to do. And it always happened to be that God agreed with what the king wanted. That's how it worked, right? For thousands of years. Finally, some people stood up and said, we don't like this system. Your country was founded by 13 colonies who had all fled Europe for religious liberty. That's why this wasn't about tea taxes, as they'll tell you. This was about religious liberty. When they saw King George breaking the agreements with the colonies and coming after their freedom of conscience, they knew they were going to get a state religion imposed on them from England. And they were not going to take it. Your pastors led that revolution. Hundreds of revolutionary commanders were pastors. The majority of them were pastors or clergymen, folks. It was all about religious liberty. And they had this crazy idea, this new experiment, that your rights came from God, not the king, not the government. And that's what inspired them. But it wasn't easy, people. They fought year after year after year. They were dodging British bullets, freezing in the snow, losing almost every battle, eating berries to survive. And maybe they might get home to see their families once in 6 months. And maybe all they'd find is a burnt out barn and some graves. That's all they would find, folks. But they persevered year after year after year. I was at Morristown, New Jersey not long ago, where your troops spent the winter of 1780. And that was a little ice age, folks. That was bitter. 10,000 troops started that winter. Death, desertion, and disease took 4,000 of them. The officers were eating their dogs to survive. The troops weren't paid for months. The farmers hated them because they'd stolen every chicken for 20 miles around. They were boiling their boots to eat the leather. They were on the verge of destruction. They were almost, would you have bet that they were going to beat the British if you looked at those troops in 1780? But George Washington went down to Valley Forge and he got down on his knees and he prayed, folks. And he got up and went out to take the British out at a big surprise attack at Yorktown and turned the course of the war. Not just the war, people, world history. Can you imagine how bleak and dark this world would have been for the last 200 years without America? So what I'm saying to you folks is this. This is the time to double down. This is the time we'll try every patriot. This is the time to prove that you are a patriot when things aren't easy. I want every one of you every morning, you go to your desk and you put a photograph up of your children or your grandchildren, and you look at that photograph and you say to yourself, what am I going to do today so that you may live free? That's a decision you need to make every single day, folks. Every day. So I don't know what's going to happen, people, but I can promise you if you do nothing, your dear children will live in slavery. But if you give it everything that you have to save this republic, everything that you believe in, everything you can for your God, your country, and your children, two things may happen. One, we may give it everything that's within us to save this great republic, and maybe we still lose. But at least you'll all earn the right to look those children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. And what is that worth to you, folks? And if you win, and you absolutely can win this, people, that 2016 election, as I said, convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet. This is a special country. If you win this, you can spark an economic boom like you've never seen before. You'll set the left back 100 years. You'll spark a liberty boom, not just in this country, but all around the world. You'll set the tyrants spinning all over the world, folks, if we can recover this great republic. And all of you will earn the right to pass on to your children and grandchildren not just the amazing country that you inherited, but one even greater. It's that worth a little sacrifice, people.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you do for America, for my country, and for liberty. God bless America, God bless Florida, and God bless all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.